Asterisk please. Help me. The sun hung low over the Montana plains, painting the endless grassland in shades of amber and gold. Samuel Hayes had seen thousands of sunsets from his porch, but tonight felt different. The wind carried something strange. Across his cattle ranch a heaviness that made his weathered hands pause as he mended a bridle. Samuel was a man carved from the harsh beauty of the frontier. 43 years old, with lines etched deep around his gray eyes from squinting against prairie storms and desert sun. His ranch stretched for miles in every direction, a kingdom of solitude that he had built with his own calloused hands after the war took everything else from him. The loneliness had become his companion over the years. He spoke more to his horses than two people, found comfort in the rhythmic work of fixing fences and herding cattle. The nearest town was a 2-day ride, and Samuel rarely made the journey unless supplies ran desperately low. He preferred the honest company of his animals and the vast, uncomplicated sky. But tonight, as the golden light began to fade, that solitude was broken. A sound drifted across the prairie fence at first, like the cry of a distant hawk. Samuel stopped working and listened, his experienced ears sorting through the evening chorus of crickets and wind. There it was again. Not a bird, not an animal he recognized. It was human. Samuel rose slowly from his chair, every muscle alert. In 20 years of ranching this remote land, he had encountered drifters, lost travelers, and the occasional outlaw fleeing justice. But this sound was different. It carried a desperation that made his chest tighten with an old familiar ache. The cry came again, clearer now. A woman's voice, raw with terror and pain. Double quotes, please, help me, Samuel grabbed his rifle and stepped into the dying light. His horse, Thunder, nickered softly from the corral, sensing his master's tension. The rancher's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for movement in the gathering dusk. Then he saw her. A figure stumbled across the ridge about a quarter-mile away, barely visible against the darkening sky. Even at this distance, Samuel could see. She was injured, her movements uneven and desperate. Behind her, perhaps 100 yards back, rode 3 horsemen. They moved with the casual confidence of predators who knew their prey was trapped. Samuel had seen enough violence in his lifetime to recognize it instantly. These weren't lawmen pursuing a criminal. This was something darker, more personal. The way they hung back, letting the woman exhaust herself, spoke of cruelty that went beyond justice. Without hesitation, Samuel whistled for Thunder. The big black stallion trotted over, and Samuel swung into the saddle with the fluid motion of a man who had been riding since childhood. He urged Thunder into a gallop, racing across his own land toward the unfolding drama. As he drew closer, details became clearer. The woman was young, maybe 25, with long brown hair matted with blood and dirt. Her dress was torn, stained with red that looked black in the fading light. She kept glancing over her shoulder at her pursuers, terror written across her battered features. The 3 men behind her were cut from a different cloth entirely. Samuel had known their type during the war, men who found pleasure in others' pain, who wore cruelty like a badge of honor. Their leader, a thin man with dead eyes, called out to the fleeing woman with mock concern. Now, Sarah, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know you belong to us. The woman Sarah stumbled and fell, her strength finally giving out. She tried to crawl forward, but her injuries were too severe. That's when she saw Samuel approaching and lifted her head with the last of her hope. Double quotes, please, help me, she sobbed, her voice breaking with exhaustion and fear. Samuel reined Thunder to a stop between Sarah and her pursuers. He kept his rifle ready but not raised yet. The 3 men pulled up short, clearly not expecting interference. Evening, gentlemen, Samuel said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of absolute authority. Seems like the lady doesn't want your company. The leader laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin cup. This ain't your concern, old man. The girl owes a debt. We're just collecting. Samuel glanced down at Sarah, taking in her injuries, the terror in her eyes, the way she instinctively tried to hide behind his horse. He had seen enough broken people in his life to recognize someone who had been pushed beyond their limits. What kind of debt requires beating a woman half to death? Samuel asked quietly. The kind that's none of your business, snarled one of the other men, his hand moving toward his gun. Samuel's rifle came up so smoothly it seemed to materialize in his hands. All 3 men froze. They had mistaken his weathered appearance and quiet manner for weakness. But Samuel Hayes had not survived 20 years alone on the frontier by being soft. Here's how this is going to work, Samuel said, his voice never rising above conversational level. You're going to turn those horses around and ride back where you came from. The lady stays with me. You don't understand, the leader said, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. She's not what you think. Sarah, there, she's got a darkness in her. Made a deal she shouldn't have made. We're just God's instruments, collecting what's owed. Samuel looked down at Sarah again. She was crying now, great silent tears that cut tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. Whatever she had done, whatever mistakes she had made, she was still a human being in need of help. and Samuel Hayes had never been able to turn away from that, no matter the cost. Seems to me, Samuel said slowly, that everybody deserves a chance at redemption. Whatever debt she owes, she can work it off honest. On my ranch, the leader's face twisted with rage. You're making a mistake, rancher. That girl belongs to powers you can't imagine. Dark powers. She made her bargain, and now she has to pay. The only power I recognize out here, Samuel replied, is the one that helps people find their way back to the light. For a long moment, the standoff held. 3 armed men against 1, with a wounded woman between them. But Samuel had something. They didn't absolute moral certainty and the skill to back it up. His rifle never wavered, and his gray eyes held the kind of calm that came from facing death before and walking away. Finally, the leader spat in the dirt. This ain't over, Hayes. We know who you are now. We'll be back. You're welcome to try, Samuel said simply. The 3 men wheeled their horses and rode back into the gathering darkness, their curses fading with the sound of hoofbeats. Samuel watched until they were gone, then dismounted and knelt beside Sarah. Up close, her injuries looked even worse, but it was her eyes that broke his heart, the look of someone who had given up hope of ever being safe again. Can you ride? He asked gently. She nodded weakly, and with his help, managed to get to her feet. Samuel helped her onto Thunder behind him, then led them both back toward the ranch house. The lights of home had never looked more welcoming. Over the following weeks, Sarah slowly healed. Samuel asked no questions about her past, and she volunteered little. She worked hard around the ranch, tending the garden, cooking meals, mending clothes with hands that gradually stopped shaking. Slowly, the haunted look in her eyes began to fade. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching another sunset, Sarah finally spoke about what had brought her to his land. They weren't lying, she said quietly, about the darkness. I did make a deal I shouldn't have made. When my brother was dying, and the doctors said there was nothing they could do, I was desperate. I met men who promised they could save him. For a price. Samuel listened without judgment as she continued. The price was my soul, they said. But I didn't believe them. Not really. I thought it was just talk, just desperate people preying on other desperate people. But when my brother lived, when he got better overnight, I knew it was real. And they came to collect. What happened to your brother? Samuel asked. Sarah smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her. He's alive. Married now, with children. He never knew what I did for him. Samuel nodded slowly. Love makes us do things we never thought we could do. Good things and foolish things. But I don't believe any soul belongs to darkness if it chooses light. That night, as if summoned by her confession, the 3 men returned. Samuel was ready for them, but this time, something was different. Sarah stood beside him on the porch, no longer cowering or running. Time to pay up. Girl, the leader called out. You can't hide forever. I'm not hiding, Sarah replied, her voice steady. And I'm not running anymore. The air around the 3 men began to shimmer strangely, and Samuel realized with a chill that these weren't ordinary outlaws. Their true nature was finally showing something ancient and malevolent that had been wearing human faces. But Sarah was changing too. As she stepped forward, Samuel saw not darkness emanating from her, but light. Pure, clean light that came from a soul that had chosen love over fear, service over selfishness. The deal is broken, she said simply. I offered my soul in darkness, but I've been living it in light. That changes everything. The creatures snarled and lunged forward, but the light around Sarah flared brighter. Where it touched them, they began to dissolve like shadows at dawn. Their howls of rage and frustration echoed across the prairie until finally, they were gone. Samuel and Sarah stood together in the silence that followed, watching the stars emerge in the clear Montana sky. So, Samuel said, eventually, I guess you'll be moving on now. Sarah looked at him with surprise. If you'll have me, I'd like to stay. This feels like home, and I think you could use the company. Samuel smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling with genuine happiness for the first time in years. I reckon I could. At that, they stood together on the porch, no longer alone, watching the vast sky arch over their small corner of the world. Sometimes, Samuel reflected, salvation came in the strangest packages, and sometimes, helping someone else find their way back to the light was exactly what you needed to find your own path home. The ranch felt different now, not empty, but full of possibility. And when the morning came, they would face it together. 2 souls who had found redemption in the most unlikely place of all, in each other's company. Under the endless Montana sky,